Is the Canon R50 still worth it? I've been using it the past 2 years and I've shot thousands of photos and videos with it and compared it to the newest cameras. And I think you'll be pretty surprised to see how it compares. So let's do a deep dive into the Canon R50, the pros and the cons, how it's improved, and how it compares to the newest cameras. Also, I'll leave links down below for the Canon R50 and the other cameras I compare it to. Now, what makes the Canon R50 such a popular camera is pretty simple. It's one of the easiest and most affordable cameras for beginners and casual users. You can pick up this camera brand new at $699 and even cheaper if you find the right sale, or about $500 used. And surprisingly enough, the ecosystem around this camera has actually gotten better. One thing I love about the Canon R50 is how small this camera is. I can easily stick it in a jacket pocket or a small bag and pretty much keep it with me at all times. And it literally fits in my palm. And the lens also collapses, making it extra small. And the grip, in my opinion, feels really nice in the hands, but for some people, it might be a little bit too small. For me, it doesn't pass the pinky test, and my hands are actually a little too big, but I do not mind it at all. And the grip also has a rubberized finish that gives you a really solid hold on the camera. And despite the small size, the R50 still has all the essential buttons and dials that you need to make this an easy to use camera and use it like a real camera. It's not missing any key features. And there's also 4 really awesome shooting modes in this camera that make it really easy for beginners and casuals to get amazing shots with very little work. And I will cover these later on in the photo section. And the screen on the back is also fully touch enabled for menu settings and even autofocus. And it's also a side articulating screen so you can flip it out and see yourself. So if you're coming from a smartphone, this will feel right at home. And you can also seamlessly connect the R50 to your phone to transfer photos and videos, but you can also use your phone for remote control and remote monitoring. And the Canon R50 also has a built-in EVF and a pop-up flash, which is really rare to see on a beginner camera like this. Now, in the intro I said this camera has improved. And one thing that has massively improved on the Canon R50 is the lens selection. Canon now has way more lens options, including third-party companies, which they previously did not allow, from Sigma, Tamron, and even budget companies like Samyang and Rokinon. My favorite lenses being the official Canon 10 to 18mm wide zoom lens, or the new Sigma 18 to 50 f2.8 lens, or the absolutely insane Sigma 16 to 300mm lens, plus a host of prime lenses. So I would consider the lens problem with Canon APS-C cameras officially fixed. And the Canon R50 itself often comes with an 18 to 45mm kit lens, which is great for wide shots and tight shots, and is good enough for beginners. But if you can, I would buy the body only and then buy the right lens for you separately. But let's not forget about the cons and the downsides of this body. The HDMI and USB port on this camera are on the right side, so when you're holding this camera with anything plugged in, it becomes really hard to hold. But when I was using it with a monitor plugged in, I eventually got used to it. And if you don't shoot video, this won't matter. Now, the other issue with this body is something I also have a solution for. The battery in the R50 is really small, which is fair because it is a small camera. You'll still get a few hundred photos on a single charge in about 40 minutes to an hour of continuous video. And if you're someone that regularly uses your camera, you will need to charge it on a daily basis or at least buy a few spare batteries. And the charger the Canon R50 comes with isn't great. There's no cable, so it has to go directly into the wall, and it only charges one battery at a time, and it takes up to 2 hours for a single battery. But I have a solution. I actually recommend using the Llano battery fast chargers. And there's 2 versions. They both have a built-in dual battery charger, and they use a USB-C cable for 18-watt fast charging. So you can charge both batteries at the same time in 1.5 hours. And there's also a dual SD card holder in the smaller version. But the big one has a massive 12,400 milliamp hour battery. And this can charge not only your camera batteries, but also up to 2 external devices like your phone, making these chargers perfect for travel and a great camera accessory. Now, Llano did send me these chargers, but I don't have to say anything about them, but I thought they were pretty excellent. And they're currently 20% off on Amazon using the link down below, so check them out. Now, let's talk about the specs of the Canon R50, because for a beginner camera, it absolutely packs a punch. Inside you have a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor, which delivers great image quality with tons of detail. And it's the same sensor you find in the much more expensive Canon R10 or the Canon R50V. What makes this sensor special are the colors. The colors are absolutely gorgeous. They're super warm and saturated, and they look especially good for nature and portraits. And the Canon R50 also has Canon's newest autofocusing system, which is super accurate and fast even for moving subject matter. Plus, it also has subject tracking for animals, people, planes, and cars, so the autofocus will not let you down. And for casual, lifestyle, vacation, or photography practice, this autofocus is insanely reliable. But one thing I will criticize is the low light performance. It's not great. You'll get pretty good results up to 1600 or 3200 ISO. But when you compare it to other companies that do prioritize low light performance in their cameras, it's not that great. But don't forget, you also have a pop-up flash, and most of you guys probably aren't shooting in low light. Now, let's talk about how the Canon R50 actually shoots. For photo, there are actually 4 modes that make your life a lot easier and make getting good photos as a beginner and casual user much, much easier. 1, it has scene mode on the mode dial, which has presets for portraits, landscapes, food, and much more, so your camera literally does all the work for you, you just tell it what you're shooting. Or there's Creative Assist, where you actually set up things like brightness, contrast, background blur, and the camera does all the technical things for you, and this way you still get more creative control over what the image should look like. And you also have Creative Bracketing, where you take a photo and the camera actually gives you back 2 stylized color edits with no work on your part. And lastly, you also have Automatic Plus. This is where the camera takes several photos at the same time and uses computational photography to combine them into the best possible image, similar to what Samsung and iPhones do. But the Canon R50 image quality is going to blow any iPhone or Samsung phone out of the water. So with these 4 smart features, even if you're brand new to photography, you can easily get good looking photos, and using this camera could not be easier. But if you shoot manual like me, there's a few things we should talk about. The R50 shoots 12 frames per second in first current electronic shutter, which is a hybrid between mechanical shutter and electronic shutter. And it's about this fast. And it can shoot for a pretty long time, or up to 28 photos in a row. And it also has 15 frames per second in full electronic shutter mode, which sounds like this. And again, it does shoot for a pretty long time. But this is JPEG photos only, which are great for casual use, but aren't really the type of photos you would shoot if you want to go in and do some heavy editing to your photos. If you want to shoot raw photos, which is the ideal format for shooting if you want to do some heavy editing later on, this is what it sounds like. It can only shoot for a little tiny fraction before it needs a break, because it can only do about 7 photos in a row in normal RAW or 10 photos in compressed RAW. And if you want to shoot RAW, this is more of a slow and deliberate camera. Now, whether this matters to you or not depends on if you're more of a casual photographer or someone that's looking to get serious, and if you even want to do long burst shooting. But one thing that photographers should know is that this camera does not have any sort of in-body stabilization for handheld photos or slow shutter photos. But the lens that it comes with does have image stabilization, as do most Canon lenses. So even if your hands are a little bit shaky, you'll still get sharp photos. And the Canon R50 also has a mode for shooting HDR photos and a separate mode for doing focus bracketing, which basically takes several photos at the same time at different focus points. You can combine all of them to get one photo where everything is in focus. And on top of that, it also has something called movie time-lapse mode. This is technically a video feature, but I think time-lapse makes more sense in the photo section. But when it comes to features for photographers, this camera honestly has everything you could possibly need to make all of your creative ideas come true, and honestly learn everything you could possibly want about photography on a really nice beginner camera. For video, this camera is much more straightforward and very easy to understand, but the specs are still really impressive. It shoots 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, but it's also downsampled from 6K. So your 4K video actually has the detail and quality of 6K, but in a much smaller and easier to edit file. And it might not sound like 6K is that much more than 4K, but 4K is 8 million pixels and 6K is 20 million pixels, so you get a whole lot more detail without needing bigger files or without having to pay more for your camera. It's honestly an amazing feature. And if you're worried about file sizes, the Canon R50 also has 2 separate video codecs. You have regular 4K IPB codec and IPB Lite, which is even smaller and easier to edit and takes up less space without sacrificing image quality. So there's something in here for everyone, whether you're serious or just a casual. Now, this camera does not have in-body stabilization, but it does have digital stabilization for video, which does a really decent job. Here's a clip with no stabilization, and it's kind of bumpy and not amazing, And this is with standard stabilization. It's a very minimal crop and it does a really good job smoothing out the footage. And this is enhanced stabilization, which has a pretty heavy crop and zooms into your footage, but it adds a lot more stability. So if you're someone that does a lot of handheld shooting, the Canon R50 has you covered. Now, let's talk about the more advanced video features. The Canon R50 also has slow motion options with full HD at 60 frames per second for 2x slow motion and 120 frames per second for 5x slow motion. And one really cool feature is the inclusion of HDR-PQ mode with 10-bit color. And this gives you a flatter image with more dynamic range and more color flexibility for serious color grading. Now normally you want a log profile for the best results, which are ultra flat. But log profiles also require a few extra steps to get them to the right place, and you usually need a computer to properly edit them. But HDR-PQ mode is much simpler for editing, and you can pretty much do all of it on your phone or iPad. And when this camera first released, HDR-PQ mode didn't really have a lot of support in software, but that's another place where the Canon R50 has improved. There's a lot more HDR support available now, so this camera, without doing anything, has actually gotten better, or at least the end result for the consumer has gotten better. And now, the real question is, how does the Canon R50 compare to the competition? And is the Canon R50 still worth it? Well, this is the part where some of you guys might get mad at me, but before you do, hear me out. You can't just compare the Canon R50 to other cameras purely on specs. Cue the emotional music. The main competition to the Canon R50, which is the ZV-E10 II, the ZV-E10 Original, the Nikon Z50 II, or even the Fuji X-M5, all have better sensors, better autofocus, well, at least some of them, better frame rates for the most part. And technically, they are all better than the Canon R50. The R50 is actually the weakest one. But here's the thing, you can't just compare the specs, because the Canon R50 is trying to be the most affordable options and the simplest options for beginners, because those other cameras are actually about $400 to $500 more expensive. And the Canon R50 isn't trying to be the king of the hill when it comes to specs. That's what the Canon R50V is for. It's basically a beefier version with some Canon R10 features in a video-centric body. And if you're someone that's a serious video shooter, don't get the R50, get the R50V or any of the competing cameras. So the Canon R50 is arguably the simplest and easiest cameras for beginners that just want to take photos for fun, maybe take a few photos for their business, family stuff. You simply cannot find a better camera at this price point. So if you want to make sure you get the best possible deal on your R50, check out the links in the description down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.